Hey everybody, it is Henry W. Steele, and I'm doing this video because I want to ask you a few questions. I want to see what you think about some stuff. I want you to think about some stuff is what I'm saying. So this is the 1929 annual stock forecast of W.D. Gann's, probably the most famous of his annual forecasts because of the big 1929 stock forecast, or not stock forecast, but the 1929 crash. And here that is. If you go to prorealtime.com, you can sign up for a free account, and no, I'm not affiliated with them in any way. It's just one of the charting platforms that I use because they have data for the Dow Jones Industrial Average that goes all the way back to late 1928. So it makes it really easy to chart and get this data. So I'd recommend, if you don't have the data and can't chart it because you don't have it, that this is a very easy way to get it for free. Saying that, the 1929 annual stock forecast of W.D. Gann's, I have a few questions I want to ask you about that. I want you to think about what the answers might be. Let's see. The first thing I want to ask you about is, do you think Gann was talking about the Dow Jones Industrial Average with projection curve or projected curve number 1? Because it says here projected curve number 1 and main trend which the 30 industrial stocks should follow. So it sounds like he's talking about the Dow Jones Industrial Average, right? What do you think? Now, also, you can download this 1929 annual forecast from a lot of different places online. And if you don't have a copy of it already, the whole thing, not just the first page or two, because it's actually 19 pages long, I think. If you don't have a copy of it, get it and download it and read it, because it's really interesting reading. He has a lot of different, it's not just a little stick figure forecast for what he expected the market to be. He's got a lot of information in there. He's even got a section on how he recommends trading the forecast, which is pretty interesting stuff. So anyway, back to this. Do you think he's talking about the Dow Jones Industrial 30 here? Because he does have a second projected curve on number 2, which industrial stocks in a strong position should follow. So is he talking about just stocks here or the Dow Jones Industrial 30? What do you think? So that's my first question. I know what I think. Now the second question is, if this is the Dow Jones that he's talking about, or the stock average, the Dow Jones Industrial 30, why does he have the top marked for August? The big top he has as August 7th through 8th instead of the famous September 3rd top. Why is that? Why do you think he's off? Because he's off almost a full month right there, right? And he's expecting the bottom in December 23rd or 24th, and we see that there is actually a bottom right there in the 23rd, but it's not the big bottom for the year. So why do you think that he was off? Okay, those are a couple of questions. Another question is, why do you think he did not anticipate there being a crash like this? You might ask yourself, well, wait a minute, what do you mean he didn't anticipate a crash? Well, look at the scale here. The scale, he doesn't have the price of the market. He has par, meaning on January 2nd, the first trading day of the year, he has par set to 0, or that's the standard right there. And then he has the number of points moved this way, and it's not necessarily points of the market, but it's a scale that's used so that you can see relative movement compared to the rest of the year. And we see that there is nothing here, and especially here where the strong stocks are concerned, and even the railroad stocks, he's not expecting any crash scenario like this. I mean, this goes way below the bottom here, and he wasn't expecting this to be broken until December, approximately, November and December, where he was expecting the low. So my question to you is, why do you think Gann missed that? Now, he was looking for some sharp moves, in quotes, to the downside in September. So if you really want to stretch things and say, oh, well, Gann was anticipating the crash, but in September, okay, so why was he off on that? So that's the next question I have for you. Now I have another question, and that is, have you ever run through this forecast and looked at it against the actual stock or the Dow Jones Industrial Average prices? If you haven't, I highly recommend that you do, because it's really interesting to see what you see. To see the results of that, I should say. See what you see is pretty not the best way to say that. Okay, so when you do that, you're going to notice some things. He has dates here that show up for the weekend, but if you pay close attention, there's never ever a printed number date for Sunday. It's always for Saturday. And that's because the market was open on Saturday in 1929. It was open 6 days a week, not 5 days a week like it is now. That didn't change until 1952, I think it was. Anyway, so do you think there's a significance to that? Do you think if you run through these, are you going to find Sunday listed as a number? Now, an example right here would be January 5th through 7th. January 5th is a Saturday. The dash would be, in this case, the 6, which is Sunday, and then the 7 would be Monday. Do you think that that's important, that this number 6 is not there? Just a question I have. If you run through the rest of these, you're going to find a fair amount of Saturdays show up, and now you know why that is. But there's never a Sunday that shows up as a number. I wonder why. Now, let's see. What's another thing that I could ask here? Let's look at, where is it at? February 13 through 14, Gann's expecting a high. That's this dot right here. He's expecting a high. Then a sharp move to the downside to February 28th. Okay, so let's look at that. Let's zoom in and then scroll over. So here is February 13th. So that is definitely a high. But then the market moves down to February 18th and then up to March 1st, which is just one day after February 28th. So he was expecting a high to a low, but he got a high to a high, essentially. So what happened there? Now, I've seen this explained before as a quote-unquote box move, where they're saying, well, he anticipated the 28th was going to be a high. Or, I'm sorry, a low right there. So he was off by 2 days, and the low came in on the 26th right there. So we had the high here, and there's the low, right? I mean, that would explain away his getting the polarity wrong. But the problem I have with this is Gann included his expected price movement also, and he was expecting a strong and long move there price-wise, and that is not represented by that at all. So my question to you is this accurate? Is this high go to this low, or was this an inverted, was this low, the February 28th low, should it have really been a high? So that's the question, and there are certain scenarios like that that show up through there. Also, I have another question for you when it comes to this particular forecast. If you run into a situation where you have an inversion, how is it that parts of the forecast past the inversion are still accurate in their polarity? So those are very, very good questions, I think. There's another question I have down. Let's see. War. One of the things he's talking about in here is war. Our great prosperity has caused jealousy throughout the world. Remember, this is from 1928. He's writing this for 1929. And as conditions get worse in the foreign countries, greed and jealousy will lead to war. It is the hungry dog that starts the fight. A study of the rise and fall of nations shows that when any country enjoys unusual prosperity for a long period of time, war is one of the main causes of the start of depression. While we hear a lot of talk about peace, the facts show that many of the leading foreign countries, as well as our own country, are spending more and more preparing for war than ever before in their history. When a man or a country is armed and gets ready to fight, he usually gets what he's ready for. So here's my question for you. The Tunnel Through the Yearbook was written in 1927. It was published and released, I think it was actually published in November of 1927, even though the foreword is dated for May of 1927. It was actually published in November. So here's my question. In that book, Gann describes a war from 1930 to 1932. And of course, pretty much everyone believes that that war is describing the stock market moving down from 1930 to 1932. Which you're not going to really get an argument from me about that. But is it possible that Gann may have actually believed that there was going to be a war around 1930? I mean, he did include this in his 1929 forecast, so obviously it's not a big part of it, doesn't seem like. But that's another question I have for you. Was Gann anticipating the United States being at war around 1930? So let's see. Those are all the questions I have on my list here, and I'm already over about 10 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here. What do you think about those things? What have you thought about this forecast if you've read it already? If you haven't read it and you download it and you do read it, what information can you glean from it? So ponder on that for a while if you have the inclination. If not, then okay. But I will talk to you in the next video. I hope you have a wonderful week.